let's dive in. So the first thing I actually wanted to talk about is really the definition of health. So what would be included in a definition of health? So for you guys, what comes to mind when you think about health?
I think physical well-being.
Okay. So there's two parts to that. There's the physical and then the well-being part. Yeah. What else comes to mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Vicki, I think you're muted.
Oh, there. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with physical, but for myself, I'm also very aware that my emotions affect my physical a lot. My attitude, emotions, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I did look up a few definitions. The online dictionary said it's a state of being free from illness or injury. Webster's dictionary said the condition of being in sound mind, body, mind, or spirit. Webster also had a second definition, and that was a condition in which someone or something is thriving or doing well. And then I thought the most interesting one was the World Health Organization's definition, and that says health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So a couple of those definitions captured a little bit more than just the physical, although I think that's the first thing that usually comes to mind when we think about health is physical health. And that's what we kind of get bombarded with from the medical community is take care of your physical health, exercise, diet, eat salt, don't eat salt, all sorts of different advice that doesn't always, sometimes it is clear, sometimes it's pretty muddy. I thought it was interesting that Webster's uses body, mind, and spirit. The World Health Organization used physical, mental, and social. So that was interesting. Kind of different pieces of it that and then the World Health Organization also said complete well-being. Webster's used thriving or doing well. So I think it's interesting that they would use those words, and yet the definition of each of those is going to be different for each person, because one person's thriving may not be another person's thriving. So yeah, and so that's one of the things that as we go through this class, and I'm going to have you guys think about things for yourself and how you would promote health, and it can be wildly different from one person to the next. And that's okay, because we're all individuals, and things can come out just a little looking different for each of us, and what recharges each of us, areas we struggle in are different for each of us. All right. Before we go any further, I do want to focus a little bit on that word thriving. So what comes to mind when you think of thriving?
I think of being all that God intended us to be. So it is more comprehensive.
Yeah, and that really gets at the core of things, because we always talk at church about the restoration of all things. And I really do think, when we do reach that restoration, we will be the people that he intended us to be if we had been born in the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we were intended to be, but we live as broken people in a broken world. So yeah, and God's definition, I would suspect, goes way above and beyond what any secular definition would be. Yeah, that's great. All right. So one of the things, just a little bit of my background, I've been a nurse for 28 years now. And I spent a very good amount of that time on the neurotrauma rehab unit at St. Francis. So one of the things that really got me thinking about holistic health, what I realized is healthcare really kind of gives holistic health. It gives it pretty decent lip service, but it really focuses on the physical health. Bless you, Carmen. It looked like you sneezed. And I started watching patients coming in. When we would admit them, I remember thinking, there were some people that would come in, you know, they were raring to go, ready to work. They had good mental, emotional, and oftentimes spiritual health. And we would do this thing called a functional movement inventory when they first came. So we would score them on how debilitated they were, and then after those 3 days, we would get a score, and that's how long Medicare or insurance would allow them to stay on rehab. So we would have an estimated discharge date then. What I found is that people that came in strong in their mental, emotional, and spiritual health were discharging a day or two, sometimes 3 days before their estimated discharge date. Those that came in depressed, dragging, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to me, my life is ruined, they would sometimes stay a week or even longer past their expected discharge date. So that really got me thinking, what is going on here? How intertwined are these areas? So what I realized, you know, the mental, emotional, spiritual stress actually slows physical healing. And I was actually just on the verge of starting some literature review to do some research into this and see, is there evidence to back this up? And I never did get to do that because I switched over to teaching nursing at Penrose or at Pikes Peak Community College. But this is from my observations, whereas that mental, emotional, spiritual stress slowed physical healing. Constant bombardment with negative thoughts would also affect emotional health. It would affect healing. It would affect motivation. That kind of took people down. People that were distressed, worried, fearful, angry, that also really affected all the different areas. Socially, this was a hard one. We would have people that had almost no visitors. And that really did seem to affect their progression in the program. Spiritually, it was a little hard to tell because people weren't always open about what was going on spiritually with them on the rehab unit. But what I thought, okay, these are all really intertwined. So what I came up with, I'm going to share my screen here for just a minute, was a model. Share it with you. All right, can you guys see that? So it's kind of green and blue. So we've got physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and little arrows. Everything's interconnected, everything's affecting the other areas. And I kind of went with this for a while, and then I realized, you know what? There's something missing in this. So what do you think is missing from this model? Any thoughts on that?
Social.
Right, social wasn't on there. And then the other thing I thought is I put spiritual health, I don't know if you guys can see my marker here. Spiritual health is just one quadrant. Because what I was thinking is physical health is kind of like body, mental health is mind, emotional health, spirit, and then spiritual health is as soul. So I thought, oh, this kind of captures the whole person. But God made us to be social people. So that made it a little harder. So I've been thinking about it, and I came up with a separate one, a second one. So that's this one right here. So this one has physical, mental, emotional, social, but this one does is actually puts the spiritual in the middle. Because what I've kind of learned since made the first one is that the spiritual really is what provides the energy and the direction and the means for achieving health in these other areas. So this is my working model now until I figure out, well, I mean, this isn't quite right yet. But for now, I've really liked putting that spiritual in the middle, because it really does speak to all the different areas and really is kind of the foundation of that. All right, I think I might need your help, Linda, to take that down. Somehow it's not giving me that option again. There we go. All right. Bring out my.
So can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
What would you say then to someone who does not consider that spiritual is a reality for them?
Yeah, that makes it a little hard. Because then they must rely on human wisdom, human energy to provide the means and the support for their pursuit of health. So what they would probably put in the middle instead of spiritual is they would put self.
Mm-hmm.
Or family, maybe self, culture, family. That's going to be their source of energy, wisdom,
mm-hmm.
and all of that to be able to pursue the rest of this. Whereas for those of us who have that foundation in Christ, we've got incredible, we have access to incredible power and wisdom and strength and all of that to pursue, to tap into as we pursue health in all of these other areas. Yeah, it's kind of hard, and I stop and when I stop and think about that, it's like, okay, well, which one would I choose? Do I want to go with my own energy, or do I want to go with God's? And for me, it's a no-brainer. But yeah, that's a tough one. So
yeah, because there are people out there that we're relating to that's not their frame of reference, and therefore, they've got to be drawing somewhere from it. Right. And some of them would say, oh, I'm just fine without God. I'm fine without, that. And so they've reorganized their source of strength.
Right. Well, and I remember Pastor Ken talking, this is a while ago in a sermon, it was probably a good 6 months or more ago, and talking about how, we've got our lives, and if we don't have God supporting the weight of our life, we look to other people to support the weight of our life. Mm-hmm. But if you in a relationship, if you've got two people trying to support each other's weight, it doesn't work real well. You can trade off, but it's like when this person supports the other one, then they'll get boosted, but then this one's completely depleted. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's a physics concept that a closed system actually loses energy. So if you for any kind of system, if you've got a closed system, it will degrade. And things don't, you got to have energy or something infusing it for it to even remain what it is. And that's just part of how our world and we are all made. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they may say they're fine, but they may not realize the potential that they're missing out on.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Good question, though. All right. So when we talk about health promotion, I mean, let's just say physical, because that's what we get bombarded with all the time, physical health. There are kind of two different components that that are part of promoting health, maintaining health, and those are exercises and hygiene. So for example, for physical health, exercises are great, right? So we can do mild to moderate exercise, we can do extreme exercise. Some people love hiking the incline. I would rather just hike the neighborhood. And just as a side note, the evidence does not show that there's any increased health benefits from doing extreme exercises versus mild to moderate exercise. In the long run, it's the same. So moving. moving is good. So exercises are good. And then we do daily hygiene, like we brush our teeth, we take showers, we put on lotion so our skin doesn't dry up and crack. So we do daily hygiene to kind of just make sure things keep working like they're supposed to. But other parts of the exercise too is that for our physical health, we do checkups. So sometimes there's like yearly things that we do, not just daily or weekly things that we do to promote health. All right, so I actually have a whole bunch of Bible verses, and I can look them up, or if other people want to help read, that would be great. I'll start us off since we started on physical health. Let's just keep going with that. So the verse I have for that is 1 Corinthians 6, 19 through 20. So 1 Corinthians 6, 19 through 20. Up here. And one of the things I don't like to do is just to kind of cherry pick Bible verses. I like to make sure that the context is not ignored. So I did read, going back, this whole chapter is really talking about, well, this whole section is talking about sexual immorality, but the verses at the very end say, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you are bought at a price, therefore honor God with your bodies. So we do kind of have a mandate to not just let ourselves go and, whatever it's going to be is going to be. And God has us here for a purpose, and maintaining our physical health allows us to step into what he might have for us to do with him. So, like I said, we kind of talked about some of the exercises for this. The reason that exercise is really good is a lot of it is, well, strength for one thing, flexibility. But we also have, there's other benefits that come from the chemicals in the brain that are released during physical exercise. We've got oxytocin that's released, dopamine, other endorphins. So it helps us to feel good. It helps us to stay positive. It helps us bond with other people. That's the oxytocin part of it. It actually helps boost our memory. So there's also really good things in our brains that come from physical exercise, as well as just the physical strength and flexibility, and being able to move. And of course, if we are physically healthy, that's going to help promote health in the other areas. If we are always in pain, then that's going to deplete our energy and our health in other areas. So let's take a look at mental health. So mental health is really important too. Is there anyone else that wants to read? I have Romans 12, 1 and 2 for this next one.
I can read that.
All right. So it's Romans 12, 1 and 2.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm pulling it up on my phone here. All right. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
All right. So here's where God wants us to pursue mental health and to have our minds renewed by his view of the world and his workings, so that we can align ourselves again with what he's doing in this world. So mental health. So when we think about mental health and exercises, what comes to mind for you? This one's a little harder than the physical.
Well, physical exercise and
Mhm.
being outside or daylight.
Yeah. Yeah, that vitamin D actually does help. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe exercises in thankfulness.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yep. So focusing on what's positive. This is a quote I found. Negative thinking strengthens the negative part of our mind, whereas positive thinking strengthens the positive. And God tells us, all the good things in life, we need to think about those things and concentrate on those, and having that thankful heart. Even when things don't look great, finding the one little thing to be thankful for, and it can really help boost our minds. Yep. Another thing that comes to mind for me is stress management. Because when we're really stressed out, our minds are going a bazillion miles an hour, and sometimes they don't want to shut off at night. You wake up and you can't get back to sleep because your mind is trying to figure out about 10 different problems, but it's only half awake, and so it doesn't go well. I don't know if anyone's had that, but yeah, that's, if we can manage our stress levels, find ways to de-stress before we go to bed, refocus our minds when things start to feel overwhelming, to just kind of take a step back, take some deep breaths. And I know we always talk about deep breaths, but do you guys know why they work? There's actually a physiological reason that they work, and they have to be slow, deep breaths. I'm talking 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. That was a long time. But the nerves that innervate the top part of our lungs actually are the sympathetic nervous system. So that's fight or flight. So when we're stressed, we breathe more shallowly, we trigger the sympathetic nervous system, and it's like pushing the panic button. If we deep breathe, we get down to the bottom part of our lungs, which are innervated by the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we call rest and digest. So it's slowing down, everything is okay, it's okay to eat, you don't have to run from the bear, that kind of thing. So if we can take those deep breaths, stretch out at the bottom parts of our lungs, it'll trigger that parasympathetic nervous system. And so that actually will help us relax. So next time you're actually stressed, try it out. And it's the 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out is ridiculously long. But after about 5 of those, you will actually feel your body physically relaxing. It's pretty incredible. So when I would teach stroke class, I would actually make my patients do it. It's like, we're going to do this now. But that's, yeah, managing that stress. Hygiene. So hygiene for this, because we want, like we floss our teeth, we brush our teeth, have showers. We do things to kind of clean and get rid of things that we don't need. So what comes to mind for hygiene for mental really is things like identifying cognitive distortions. Now that's kind of a big term, but when we get stressed, we tend to do things like overgeneralize, we jump to conclusions, we'll focus in on a single detail, like, woo! And that increases our stress levels. So if we can really monitor our thoughts, when negative stuff kind of starts flooding in, we can sort through that. So it's really identifying the ways that our perception of reality has gotten distorted. And maybe we are even not even seeing it realistically. So we need to take a step back. There's actually something in cognitive theory where it's called, actually here, I'll share the screen again. Putting thoughts on trial. So I actually pulled up a little worksheet on this. Can you guys see it there?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, I have to share it. There we go. There we go. So this is actually, you know, if someone's going through therapy, then they could do this. But I thought, oh, this, you know, it kind of gives a visual. So you've got this thought, and then you've got the defense. So the evidence for the thought, is this realistic, or am I just going off the deep end? And there's a prosecution. Okay, all this evidence here is saying, you know, that might not be the case. And then you got the judge's verdict. So it's just kind of a fun little exercise. But, you know, we can do that whenever, you know, it's like, am I being unreasonable? What's going on here? Am I flying off the handle for no particular reason, and it's affecting my mental and my emotional health? Then this could be a tool. Okay, you can stop sharing if you wouldn't mind, Linda. Thanks. All right. Yeah. So just to kind of recap on the mental health. So we can do exercises to reduce stress. We can monitor our thoughts, and just really focusing on positive. And I think that's a really great way to do it. And then make sure that we are doing some mental floss as well, so that we're clearing out negative thoughts, because there's so much in this world that is telling us that we are not doing things right. We are worthless. You goofed up again. All of those thoughts, they don't need to be there. I mean, that's like having popcorn stuck in your teeth. You know, it needs to be flossed out. All right.
Heidi, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
How about the design of God with sleep as a process by which our minds and our emotions are actually cleansed? And if we don't get enough, we don't get into those cycles that he's designed for restoration for us.
Yes. And that's actually a really good point. I actually put it under emotional health, but it is under mental health.
But it
as
is
well.
mental. Yeah.
It is mental, because when we sleep, that is when we take our short-term memories and we code them into long-term memories. We sort through the day's experiences and we decide, okay, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to kind of get rid of that. Sleep is absolutely essential for mental health. And even I was reading this, I should have saved it. This was a while ago. It was something like, even if you pull one all-nighter, you stay up all night, it'll diminish your brain capacity for quite a long time. Even a few hours of disruption. You know, say you normally go to bed at 9 o'clock, but something is going on, you end up staying up till midnight. You know, you're all playing, you've got family over, you're playing games and whatnot, having a great time, but you end up going to bed really late. That can really throw things off for you mentally and emotionally too. So yes, sleep is incredibly important for mental health, to code memories, to just sort through the whole day so that you can wake up and you're ready for another day, because without it, it's pretty hard to do that. And we've all experienced that. But regular sleep, so a good chunk of it, most people need at least 7 hours. Some people need 8. I've got autoimmune issues, so I actually do 8 to 9, which makes, I have to be pretty efficient for the rest of the day because I've slept half of it away. But I actually do really well on 9 hours of sleep. So yeah, and then also consistency. So getting to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time every day, that rhythm is really, our bodies really like that rhythm. Yeah. One little caveat on that is, I know some people really struggle with sleep. Most sleep aid drugs will put you to sleep and you'll feel like you slept, but they often will prevent you from going into REM sleep.
Right.
So they're not great. So even Benadryl, which is added to Tylenol PM and Motrin PM, that will do the same thing. Natural sleep is just better if we can somehow do that. But I know there are people who really struggle with that. I have a son who has never slept well. He didn't sleep through the night till he was 5. And even now it's like, we'll sign him up for church and it'll be like the 9:30 service. And we're like, he should be here. And then he'll show up at our house around 11 for brunch. And we're like, yeah, great, show up for food. But he's like, yeah, I didn't get to sleep till 5 in the morning.
Wow.
It's just how he's wired. He doesn't sleep well. So,
and haven't they also correlated the sleep aids that it also shuts down the part of the brain that is doing the cleansing of the plaques that actually then leads to Alzheimer's. So if you're missing that, so I've read a study on that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that there's a correlation with just all the over-the-counter normal sleep aids with it's stopping the part of the brain that's the sewer system, the cleansing of the plaques, and therefore you're going to make yourself more likely. That's what's made me go, okay, I got to stop this. I want my brain to be healthy.
Yeah, well, and Ambien is an interesting medication because they actually it has a real short half-life. So they designed it for you to take it, and in about 3-4 hours, it wears off, and that's when you're supposed to transition into natural sleep. But then everyone's like, well, I it works for the first half of the night, and then I'm wide awake. So then they came out with the extended release, and I'm like, well, that defeats the purpose.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, but I have not seen that things like valerian root and chamomile do that. They do make you sleepy, but it might just be that there aren't studies on those, and they may actually do the same thing. I don't know.
I hope not.
Yeah, yeah. But having that regular sleep, and whether you're a night owl or a morning person really is actually defined. That's genetic. My husband would love to be a morning person, but I know that I can't talk to him for at least an hour or longer in the morning. I'm a morning person, I'm awake, and I'm like, me, and he's just like, So, but there's just really no changing that. That's kind of a genetic thing. But, if you're a night owl, then just move the chunk of sleep later if you can. And if you're a morning person like me, I often will head to bed around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and then lights out by 9 is what I aim for. So, yeah.
What is it that wakes us up in the middle of the night? What is it that makes it so we can't sleep all night? Is there any explanation for that?
Yeah. Humans actually are designed for 2 sleep cycles. You look at all the historical records from 200 years ago or more, from many different cultures, there's a first sleep and a second sleep. So people would go to bed when the sun went down, they'd get up and they'd be up in the middle of the night for about an hour or 2, and then they'd do a second chunk of sleep. It wasn't really until we had electric lights that we started staying up later, and then we started assuming that we were designed to have one chunk of sleep all the way through the night, and we aren't.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is kind of a big deal. So the companies that are producing all these sleep aids are going on the assumption that people think that we should have an 8-hour chunk of sleep and not ever wake up. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes I'm tired enough I can go right back to sleep. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm awake. I'm just going to get up and do some work or read or do something, and then in an hour or 2 I'll just see if I'll go back to bed and do another second chunk of sleep. So yeah,
that's a big deal to recognize. I had heard that before, but to have you verify it, and historically, that is something we should be paying attention to. No,
right.
Again, that's partly how God wired us. And if we're not aligning with how he wired us, then we're messing ourselves up.
We could be. And we're also creating a lot of emotional stress because we're like, oh my gosh, I was up in the middle of the night for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, well, you know what? If that's natural, then we're like, okay, well, that's the way it was today. And maybe tomorrow night I'll sleep all the way through. But
and then also to see what's a productive thing that we would do for those 1 to 2 hours. I mean, I have done a lot of international travel in my life, and there have been times where I would be up in the middle of the night and be really, really productive and then go back to sleep. And I got good sleep. But those have not been, that hasn't been a lifestyle pattern. But what if we made it a lifestyle pattern and we were actually helping ourselves and then able to go into that second sleep the way we were supposed to? That is just a lot to get your head around.
Yeah, yeah. Carmen, did you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, my son gave me a podcast, the Rich Roll podcast. He was interviewing Matthew West, who's I think I have the name right. He's a sleep researcher out of Scotland, but he's in California right now. It was a 3-hour podcast, and it was fascinating to me, just about different ideas of how to sleep, how important it is. I can pass that link on if that's helpful. I don't have the nursing background, but it was an impressive, thorough investigation of sleep.
And I'm sure he knows way more than I do about it. So yeah.
That'd be great to get that link.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's easily accessible, you can even just throw it into the chat, or I don't know how accessible it is for you. But.
I'll try and figure out if I can figure that out.
Okay, if not, don't worry about it. But we can maybe get that sent out to everyone that's registered too. So yeah, all right. Yeah, that was a really good point. Let's actually carry that over into emotional health. So Matthew 11:28. I was kind of looking at that one for someone like to read it, or I can read it. We're all very familiar with this one.
I've got it.
Go for it.
Matthew 11:28.
Oh, then no, that's not it. Oh. Hold on.
Okay.
It was the "Come to me, all who are weary." Let me find it.
That's it.
Is it? Mm-hmm. I must have just clicked on the wrong.
I've got it in my paper Bible here.
Oh, yep, there it is. That's it. Yep. Actually, go ahead and read all the way through 30.
Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light."
All right, thank you. So when we think about exercises for emotional health and hygiene for emotional health, what kind of comes to mind?
One thing would be just being able to talk through your feelings and just get them out instead of letting them turn into a fuzzball in your head and your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where actually prayer can come in as well. Oh, thanks, Carmen. There's the link. Awesome. This is a concept that I've kind of been, Vicky and I walk, so she's heard me say this a lot already. If God lives in us, He's with us through every experience of our day. He knows what's coming at us. He knows what's coming out of our hearts in response to it. He knows where our energy levels are at. And just being able, and I think Pastor Aaron kind of touched on this with his sermon today, that if we take our emotions to God, it's not like he doesn't want to hear them. He knows them. We don't have to tell him. He already knows because he was there. But just being able to process them with him and aligning our emotions with what he is about and where he would like our emotions to be, and help us sorting through that. That's a great way to do it. But doing that with another person is also really helpful too. But I totally agree that stuffing emotions is like one of the worst things we can do. People actually get physically ill from that. And when you think about it, once our physical health is depleted, we die. There are people who actually die from depleted mental health as well if they commit suicide. But people also die from a complete depletion of emotional health. We have couples that are married for 68 years and one of them dies.
Yeah.
6 months later, the other one dies. That their emotional health was completely depleted. So we face death if we are depleted in any of these areas. If we completely depleted, because we are made to be a whole person. So some of the things that came to mind for me for emotional health is setting boundaries. We need to know where our emotional boundaries are. We need to recognize where we're at emotionally. Some days I can handle a fair amount. Other days I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of done today. And for me, I know that when I'm not feeling well because of my autoimmune stuff, my emotional energy also is depleted. So I have to be real careful in how I interact with people, in what I choose to engage in and what I don't engage in. So that's one of the exercises that I do, is just kind of setting boundaries based on where I'm at emotionally. Some of the things that can actually boost emotional energy are volunteering, journaling, talking with another person about emotions, gratitude lists. So going back to what you said, Carmen, about being thankful. That gratitude list can actually help boost our emotional energy as well. One of the things that I learned, and sorry, let me finish up with hygiene stuff. I thought about adequate sleep, time to unplug, giving yourself time to process the day, because if I'm like busy up until bedtime and then I go to sleep, that's usually when I'm up at 2 a.m. then. And it's like my brain is trying to process this inundation, or something really bothered me during the day and I didn't kind of make peace with it before I went to bed. So that's some good things. One of the other things that this is kind of a personal thing that I've learned to do over the last number of years, is I've realized that, let me back up a little bit. What we put our hope in is what we worship. And hope is very much intertwined with emotions. So one of the exercises that I've learned to do is whenever I have a strong emotional reaction to things, I take a step back and look and ask myself, why am I reacting that way? Why did this trigger? Is it tromping on a hope that I had that is based in self rather than in God? So what I found is that my emotions are really good at ratting out my idols. Yeah, and they squeal on me all the time. I'm like, okay, that ticked me off. Why am I ticked off? And I'm like, okay, I'm just being selfish again. I'm not seeing things from that person's perspective. But sometimes there's a strong reaction to something and it absolutely and completely aligns with God's heart. And that's okay. That's a good, strong emotion to have. You know, if a child is being abused and we're upset about it, that is absolutely a good anger. But if I'm angry because somebody cut me off in traffic because I'm late to work, that's about me. So that needs to go. So that's one of the exercises, emotional exercises I've done to say, okay, why am I feeling this? I'm feeling super excited about this. Well, are my hopes displaced? Have I put my hope in something that is worldly or not of God, and it actually was worked out, so I'm super excited? Or am I upset? Am I sad? What's going on emotionally, and is the emotion and the reason behind the emotion aligning with God's heart, or is it not? Because then I start looking at myself, and then I can start talking myself down off the ledge, because it's like, okay, you know what? That's pride once again. So I need to work on that, and I can bring it to God and say, okay, I need some help with this, because you know what? This really did tick me off, and that's a real genuine emotion. And then I can work through it. So that might be something that is a tool that works for you. I started working on my pride about 6 years ago, and goodness sakes, that is the deepest, darkest hole I've ever dug. So, but that was part of that. All right.
I find that I somehow connect emotions and spiritual. I don't know if I overdo that or not, but there's a lot of connection there for me. And sometimes I can't get to my emotions without some kind of a time with God, a time listening, a time quiet. They're connected in my mind.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's hard to define what emotion is actually causing the reaction, because we may feel anger, but when we start digging a little deeper, we might find that it's actually grieving instead, you know. And I think we totally underestimate grieving processes.
Yeah.
We think of them, you know, when there's a big traumatic event, yes, you're going to have a grieving process. But we run into grieving processes all day long. I mean, you've had a hard day and you know that there's one blueberry muffin left at home. And you're just like, when I get home, I'm eating that blueberry muffin. And you come home and somebody else is eating it. And there's a grieving process for that. You know, it's not going to interfere with your life for the next week. But you know what? We have to give ourselves spaces for all the grieving processes that we run into in a day, you know. And sometimes there's silly little things like, you know, I really wanted to get this at the grocery store and they were out, or you know, because it's, but if we leave ourselves space for that processing, I think that's really, and processing with God is great. Processing with others. Yeah, Carmen.
I think one of the things I've been introduced to over the last year is this idea of the daily examine, a prayer where you look back over the day. And the two parts of it that have been most meaningful to me are asking what has been beautiful and what has been brutal. This is my husband, who wants to join us too. I'll scooch over here. But that has just given time to, I mean, even the idea of brutal, I think we run into a lot of brutal emotions in our day, but we don't give ourselves the freedom to call it that, like these deep hurts and the deep griefs. And maybe somebody else wouldn't, like, maybe they would say, come on, it's just a blueberry muffin, give it up. But they don't understand all that went into your hope for that. And so, and then the other is beautiful. So just being able to pray to God, this is where there was something brutal in my day. This is where something beautiful. Thank you for it. That's just been a helpful exercise for me.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good one for emotional health. And as we've talked, this all is intertwined. So it's going to help your mental health. It's going to help physical health because you probably sleep better because of it. And it's all intertwined. But yes, that is actually a really good way to be honest and open about what's happened today. You know, I think we really were made to be social creatures, but we are all broken. And so when we bang and bump up against each other, we can be brutal. Yeah. And that's actually, it's good to label it that, because sometimes we'll say, oh, you know, it really wasn't a big deal. And maybe it wasn't really a big deal, but sometimes it was a big deal. So, yeah. All right. Well, that leads us into the social health piece of things. And let's take a look at Psalm 133. This one. And it's short, so we'll just read the whole thing. Does someone have that, or should I dive in?
I can do it.
All right.
I have the message, so
Oh, that might be good to hear.
bear with me. Yeah, and I just actually had to write a devotional for a conference coming up, and this is one of the passages, and I use the message. So it says, how wonderful, how beautiful when brothers and sisters get along. It's like costly anointing oil flowing down head and beard, flowing down Aaron's beard, flowing down the collar of his priestly robes. It's like the dew on Mount Hermon flowing down the slopes of Zion. Yes, that's where God commands the blessing, ordains eternal life. But it's interesting, the word unity is, I think, the NIV, but the message, what Eugene Peterson is saying is when brothers and sisters get along.
Exactly.
And the devotional I was writing was on unity, and I started it by saying, I can't remember a time ever when there's been such a challenge to unity amongst my Christian friends over issues of politics and COVID. I just pulled those two out, and there's just a challenge that is.
Right.
But getting along is a wonderful way to say it.
Right. And you know, one of the interesting things that I noticed coming out of quarantine, I was just really struck. I was like, I don't want to go out in public. Everybody's mean.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I had lost my defenses to that. You know, I had, my buffer was gone.
But I think people's angst also was so much more elevated for all of us.
Right.
That we are, even more abnormal than the normal broken.
Right. And I think it was kind of an interesting social experiment, this quarantining.
Yeah.
Because it really highlighted the fact that we are social beings. We were made to be in community, but we are, you know, it's one of those areas that also is broken. So yeah. So when we think about exercises and hygiene, when it comes to social stuff, what comes to mind for you guys?
Well, I think right away, one exercise, because I've had some struggles in this, is forgiveness. Socially, that just makes a huge difference.
Yes.
No matter who it is, just forgiving truly from my heart.
Yep.
Even if I haven't been asked to forgive, it's yeah.
Yeah, the definition I have seen, and this is a while ago, is that when there's conflict between two people, it's like they're shackled to each other. And until you forgive the person that's offending you, you will be forever shackled to that person in that event.
With
so
grudges.
Even if they don't even know it, they don't accept, you know, they may be completely oblivious to that forgiveness, but if you can forgive them, you unshackle yourself and let them go their way. So yeah, there's definitely some really good power in that. So yeah.
And also recognizing that often we can't forgive unless it's the Holy Spirit helping us. And I'm struck by the fact that Jesus hanging on the cross and Stephen, while being stoned, there was an impartation of the Spirit that was supernatural, that boggles the mind. And I think for us, we've got to remember, in and of ourselves, true forgiveness, I don't think is possible in the worst of circumstances. I think we've got to have God help us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that gets back to why I put the spiritual in the center. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Yeah. Because I think that having God's help is what we need in every area of health. Yeah. Another exercise, just depending on if you're an extrovert or an introvert, do you get energized by people, or do you get energized by being alone? Balancing time with people and time alone.
Well, and choosing which people they are.
Exactly. Boundaries here too. Yeah. Yeah. Because there are some people where you're like, you know what? I love them. Sometimes this is family. I love you. I can spend so much time with you, but I can't fix your problems for you. It wouldn't be healthy. And recognize what you can and can't do in social settings. And again, most of the time, we can't fix anything about anybody else. I know that we like to think we can, but God's the one that does the healing and the fixing in other people. But we can come alongside and support as much as our emotional energy And sometimes physical energy allows.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what you would call this, but Aaron spoke about it this morning. Just the idea of, and it goes with what you're saying, not to want to fix people, but not to want to convince people or expect people to see things your way, but to be open-minded, to listen, to be inclusive with others' ideas. And
Yeah.
I don't know if there's one word for that, but
I don't know, but it's a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, all of us have this deep desire to be known and to be loved for who we are.
Yeah.
And when we can be that to someone else, we can really encourage them.
Mhm.
And then in that listening piece, then we can maybe offer a little bit of direction, but they are the ones that have to step into that. So yeah. A couple other things that I've got on my list. Don't personalize everything.
Mhm.
That's easy to do. This world is constantly telling us that we are the center of the universe and everything should revolve around us. If something goes right, we must have done something great. If something goes wrong, it must have been somebody else's fault. We are the end all be all. And so when something goes wrong or somebody is rude, we personalize it. And we don't stop to think, oh, you know what? I wonder if they're having a really bad day.
Mm.
And stepping into their shoes a little bit. I think this is also a place where that thankfulness comes in and just being grateful, looking at the positive, focusing on the positive. And then that forgiveness that you talked about, Vicki. And that might be a good evening reflection as well, like what you were talking about, Carmen, with the, what was brutal. Can I, with God's help, start stepping into some forgiveness in that area? Because that would help heal the social piece of things as well. Because a lot of what is brutal at the end of the day came probably from bumping into somebody else. So, or our own expectations of what is socially acceptable. We may feel like, oh my gosh, I really messed up today. But to look at that situation in terms of God's priorities rather than social norms, and social expectations.
Mhm.
Yeah. But there can be some really good things that come out of social interactions, because that's how we really point each other back to God.
Yeah.
So, and I think we really need that. And Zoom is just so far away. Yeah. All right. So when we start looking at social health, we can apply the exact same things to this. There are exercises that we can do. There are hygiene things that we can do. And there are checkup things that we can do. So I really liked what Pastor Aaron said today about what God is doing isn't moments, it's a movement.
Mm.
And connecting into that whole concept that really God is with us throughout all of our day. But are we staying in tune to what he's about? Or are we just kind of compartmentalizing him into, okay, I did my morning devotions, I'll do my little evening prayer, and then the rest of the day I'm just gonna plow ahead, do my thing. But taking time to really connect into what God is about. So when we think about things to promote spiritual health, what comes to mind for you guys? Oh, you know what? I didn't read that. I'll read the Bible verse I had for this one. It was Proverbs 4:20 through 23, and I have it up here, so I'll just read it. My son, be attentive to my words, incline your ear to my sayings, let them not escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life.
Mhm.
And I thought that really captured that idea of, you know what, at the core of everything is our spiritual health.
Yeah.
And that is the life spring from which we can pursue health in the other areas.
So Heidi, I just wonder if there's one more category, not just exercise, not just hygiene, but a third category of ingestion. What do we
Ooh.
ingest? And that's food, that's social, that's spiritual, that's physical, it's emotional. And even on the spiritual, yeah, because I've been stuck and waiting for the right time to bring up. So where does food come into this? Because what we put in, but I realized ingestion actually applies to all of these. What do we take in?
Yes. And
to
that is, yeah. How do we feed
yes,
each of these areas?
yes,
That is a really good point. I love it. Yes. Yeah, because for the physical, we need to be feeding our bodies with healthy foods, fruits, vegetables, healthy foods, and not Cheetos.
yeah,
But how often do we feed our mind Cheetos?
right. Or our spirit, or our
Our
emotions.
spirit, yeah.
Yeah.
Cotton candy Bible verses, you know, pluck one out pluck one out because it sounds great. You know, slap it on their life, but it doesn't sustain. It doesn't really feed our souls.
Right.
Oh, I love that idea. That is, yeah, really good insight there. Yeah, and that's kind of part of what we need to do. And for exercises, I had like community, I had reading, I had just that whole moments versus movement idea of just dwelling with God in each day. He's in us, so we're taking him with us. You know, when we're out of the grocery store, he's coming grocery shopping with us. And then hygiene, just learning to turn to prayer at a moment's notice. That just making that kind of an instinct of. But yeah, ingesting. What are we ingesting spiritually? What is feeding our souls? And are we feeding our souls daily? I mean, there are some people who come to church on Sunday and that's their religious duty for the day, for the week. You know what? Done. And it's like, oh my goodness, what a starvation diet.
Mm-hmm.
And how often do we wait for crumbs to fall off of God's table when he says we've got a seat at the banquet table?
Yeah.
Come, seat is assigned to you. Come sit in it. Eat whatever you want.
Well, and meditating on his word. So often there is such life and course correction and guidance that all of a sudden you're just like, whoa, clarity.
Yeah.
And it's feast. It's a different form of feasting.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I had a moment like that not too long ago. It was Psalm 25. In you, O Lord, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me. And all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, I'm probably my own worst enemy. My pride is. And it goes on, I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemy. Oh, no one who puts their hope in you will ever be put to shame, but shame will come on those who are treacherous without cause. I'm like, that's me. I'm the one who's treacherous without cause, and it's only going to bring shame. So yeah, those moments where it's like you see scripture in a very different way, when you can sit in it, and and savor it.
It washes you. It cleanses.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I really have found for myself to be the core of this, all of the spiritual health, really comes in the form of surrender. and it's tied into my emotions. They start ratting me out. I'm like, okay, I gotta look at this. But I found for myself that surrendering everything, and we have a lot of songs and worship songs, I surrender all. And I've gotten a little cynical about those, and I have to confess. I'm like, I have tried that. That doesn't work real well.
Yeah.
I get in the way. Yeah, I want to say I surrender all, but I absolutely don't ever. I mean, I have all sorts of things that I do and think and feel that are self-centered, and I have not surrendered those to God. And so that has been one of the exercises that I've really been working on, just to surrender every last piece of my life, from my time, from the moment I wake up until I go to bed. Am I conscious of who God is? Am I saying the things that he wants me to say? Am I doing the things that he wants me to do? Am I being sensitive to his little, hey, pay attention here, things? I shared this with Vicki this afternoon. There was a gal that lived with us for 10 months as an exchange student, and that was years ago, but she was on my heart and mind last week, over and over and over on in this day. And finally, by like 4 o'clock, I'm sending her a message saying, you know what, you've been on my heart and mind today and praying. And it turns out she had this most horrendous day. And she said, I think it was only because of your prayers that things worked out. She is in Jordan, and her phone broke, and her host family was kicking her out, and she had a migraine, was vomiting all day. And so yeah, so it was like, oh, I wonder how many times I've missed that little, hey, maybe you should pray for this person, or maybe that person needs you to connect with them. So yeah, that surrender to who God is. But that is very much wrapped into who we see God as.
Right.
Do we see him as someone that is big enough to carry our lives? Or do we feel like we have to keep control of certain things? Because if we don't keep control, it's all going to go wrong. I'd like to share one last picture here. Let me share my screen again one last time. This was something I ran into when we were living in Mongolia. It was actually, it wasn't this exact one, but it came in a National Geographic magazine, and it was a picture. There was an article about space. But this kind of captures that same idea. So let me share this, and I hope it's big enough so you can kind of see it. So, Earth's place in the universe. So this very first picture here is Earth. And then if you take Earth and you put Earth in our solar system, we're this little red spot right here.
Yeah.
Now, if you take this whole solar system and you put it into our interstellar neighborhood, we're just this little spot right here. So that's our whole solar system right there. So then you take our interstellar neighborhood and you put it in the galaxy way, and we're somewhere along. It's a little too small for me even to see. But somewhere where this red writing is, that's where our interstellar neighborhood is. So now you take the Milky Way galaxy, you put it into our local galactic group. So we're just this little spot here in our galactic group. So that's the whole Milky Way. All right, then you take our local galactic group and put it into a supercluster. So that's there. And then you take our Virgo supercluster and put it in with all the other superclusters that are close nearby us, and that's where we are. And then you take that whole local group of superclusters of galaxies and you put them into the observable universe, and we're just this little dot right here. And what scientists suspect is that the observable universe is only about 4% of what the universe actually is.
Whoa.
That's nothing.
And I remember looking at that and I thought, my view of who God is a little bit too small. I remember looking at this for like a couple months. I just keep looking at it and I'm like, God is big. God is bigger than I think I can even comprehend.
Mhm.
And it just kept going over in my mind. God is bigger than I think he is. God is way bigger than I think he is. And that really helped transform, although that was many years ago and I'm still working on it. But when we hear the phrases, God is big enough to take care of you and take care of your problems for today. If he created the universe, he's big enough. It's probably a little overkill.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So when Linda, you can go ahead and pull that down. You can easily Google this picture and find it on the internet. But when I think about, can I trust God? Can I trust God with this? I have to know that the answer is yes, because if I believe that he created everything, then yeah, I think he can probably handle what's going on today. So when I have that assurance and that confidence that I can just sit and soak in the creator of the universe, that he wants to go to the grocery store with me, he wants to go to work with me, he wants to hear about my day. That's just a kind of a mind-boggling concept. It's way bigger than my brain can comprehend. But if I can surrender my physical health to him, like I mentioned, I've got some autoimmune stuff. I've gotten to the point where it's like, you know what? Everything could crash and burn tomorrow. Or God has the power to keep me around as long as he needs me around. So I am going to surrender my health to him. I'm going to do what I can to stay healthy, but I'm going to surrender it to him. I'm going to surrender my mental health to him. You know what? Teach me how to think about today, how to think about this situation. Bring health to my way of thinking. Bring health to my emotional state. Bring health to my social state. May not be where it should be to be healthy, but that's where I see that spiritual health being in the center and being the springboard that allows us to pursue good health in all the different areas. But I absolutely love your idea, Betty, of the whole ingestion. What are we taking in?
Yeah.
What are we feeding our mind and our spirit and our soul and our body Cheetos?
Yeah.
Or are we eating stuff that's going to sustain and help us grow and thrive?
not just Cheetos, but actually garbage, rubbish, sewage. Because we have plenty of that. That comes at us, that there's nothing about it that is helpful to us, and yet we ingest it because it's all around. I see it as a great challenge in our
and that's
world.
why there's a lot of ways where, and this is actually a concept, actually, we're talking about this today too, how when you live in another culture, you can say, okay, you know what, these are the good things about my culture and these are the good things about this culture, and that I'm going to accept those and I'm going to just leave the rest. We have to see ourselves as believers as really apart from the culture that we live in. There are good parts in it and we can pick and choose, but there are some parts of our culture where we're like, you know what, no thank you.
Yeah because it's toxic.
It's toxic. It is going to poison my soul. It's going to cause blisters on my emotions and boils in my brain.
And sometimes there are people in our lives that are toxic.
There are, yeah. And that's why we have to really prayerfully consider how much interaction we have with them. Because if we can healthily engage with them and point them in a good direction, then great. But if it's going to destroy us, then maybe that's not healthy. And then we have to trust that the God of the universe will hold them.
Yes.
And care for them.
Yes. Amen.
Yeah. God's big enough to do that. Yeah. Well, we have really reached the end of our time. Is there any last comments or things that you might want to share or questions?
For some reason, the idea, maybe it's just because of the way the day has been, but breathing in smoky air comes to mind. And I just think that's kind of where we are. Sometimes things are all around us and we don't have a choice unless we make some kind of a concerted effort to move away from that.
Yeah.
And decisions to
Right.
breathe in healthier air, go inside or whatever that takes. But I just think
Right.
that's, for me, that's been an analogy of that smoky air. And
Yeah. And do we consume social media straight up, or do we put a gas mask on first before we
Yep.
dive in?
Exactly. Yep.
There's lots of different ways that we should be filtering out what is not healthy for us. Yeah.
In all these areas.
All areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me, and